Hello, all the good people out there. It is the Ted of Good Guys Coffee Company coming at you with a good episode from growth. To grind? Yes, from growth to grind. It's a long process, you know, when coffee is grown halfway across the world and needs to get to me in your home. And so Pat and I dive into that process together. As usual, we have a good time being together, and we're happy, more than happy, ecstatic that you can join us with your own free will and be here with us along this incredible journey that most of us call life, but I just call it one big, long day of drinking coffee. Everyone, enjoy the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Check out our website that will have updates soon concerning our new name, and as well as getting subscription available to all the people who have been waiting patiently for the way that Pat and I work, which is kind of on a relaxed time, if you will. All right, take care, enjoy the podcast, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hello, all you good people out there. Once again, it is myself, Ted, joined by co-founder of Good Guys, Pat.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Here to serve it up to the people, like we usually do, in a fun and delicious manner. And today, I mean, Pat literally just told me there's 9 steps to what we're going to be reviewing today. And I have as much interest as you do on what these 9 steps are that take us from the growth of the coffee bean to the grind. And essentially what ends up, isn't the transformation of what the coffee bean is truly, amazing if you think about it, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, as I've divulged into this, just kind of getting all the little factoids about it, I didn't realize how much. I mean, it's like kind of, you can think about it and relate it to any type of food product or any product. From the very beginnings to the point where you're consuming it is, most people don't think about the process and how long that actually takes to get to your cup in the morning.
Yeah, and that's the end of my long run on sentence that I created. What ends up in the cup.
It's true. I mean, it's a few year long process from what I
man, it is pretty crazy. Last night it was St. Patrick's Day yesterday. Happy St. Patty's Day, everybody. Yeah. And Patrick. My Pat, you're my longest running celebratory partner in most holidays, actually, but St. Pat's especially.
Yeah, especially. Yep.
Can we do a quick aside of what last year's St. Pat's was? It was March 16th was the last day that bars were open inside of Pennsylvania. Why do we know this? Because we were inside of a bar in Pennsylvania, and the news of the big news of 2020 was raining on, upon us, and it just felt like a little bit of apocalypse. And I just think, being that this is kind of the anniversary time of last year, I remember my last party being with you and some others, official party, that is, out at the regular scene kind of party. And then that was a Saturday, and then Sunday, the world closed down. And so,
a last hurrah, I guess.
Yes, the last hurrah, but not the last hurrah. Just that one, just like all right, I guess it's time for a break. And then actually, Pat and I were able to kind of hunker down, if you will, and think about, this is very interesting for our coffee company, because we are a coffee company who prides ourselves on the ability for anybody to go make coffee their own way, make it their own ritual, make it special for themselves. And we realized, wow, we're kind of in a unique position where that is going to be happening more. People are going to be at home. And alas, a year later, here we are. And, nothing's changed for me as far as making coffee, because I was never the go out and buy it kind of type. But it does feel extra special. I feel like in the last year since that day, I don't know. I feel like we've been stuck indoors with everybody. That's what it feels like. As far as our coffee product goes, it's like this has been a staple in the home where most of us have been locked.
Right. I mean, I saw things during the whole lockdown term. It's been that coffee consumption has increased dramatically from what they said. And
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily I didn't even look into like the numbers of everything, but my assumption is that it was at home brewing
Yeah.
numbers probably went up because I mean at the beginning, I don't know if you remember, but most stores were closed for the
Yes.
first like couple months. So like
Yeah, most, you know what? Probably a lot of people learned how to make a cup of coffee. I mean, in
yeah,
actuality, nothing wrong with that. Just the way, whereas everything was available 1 second and then, it wasn't. Uh, yeah, that's very true, man. And what a year it's been for us to grow with some people in the home. So, I mean, we're making the best of the bad beans as it is. And are my dad jokes getting worse? By the way, I've been told lately that they're not. Anyway, the best of the beans. I haven't said that ever, but maybe I'll try and plug it somewhere else. Yeah, I mean the year. So we've been kind of honored to be the choice of the people, so to speak, who have found us and have been consistent with us, and they have found what they like. And there's just been a lot of contact. No, wait, no. I guess the touch word these days is contactless.
yeah.
There's been a lot of contactless communication between us and a lot of people. So, I mean, listen, we're all doing the best we can given the circumstances, but where we can have fun, we're going to have fun. And we have managed to have a lot of fun in the past year with people in this way. So, hey, none of that was planned between us, of course, Pat, but I just think it was an interesting time. Here we are at the year marker, pretty much. Yeah, so it is hard to believe, but so are a lot of things. And yet here we are. Time travel is almost possible. I mean, all right, I'll digress away from that. That's probably not true. I just found it on the internet. But anyways, let's talk about this 9-step process of the growth of the coffee bean to what it comes down to in your cup, because I find this extremely interesting. But I don't know the 9 steps as you have it. So.
I roughly knew. I'm sure most people have a general perception or idea of what it is, but I mean, as any food product, it starts with the planting. That's process 1, and how they actually start coffee growing is actually they put the beans in a nursery first, the shaded nursery, so the seeds actually don't see much sunlight at all. They water them heavily, and then once they start to sprout and they're hardy enough to kind of take on the elements, they then plant it in the fields, the vast fields that you probably have seen pictures of. And that's done usually in the rainy season of whatever country it is. It all kind of varies.
I imagine that's just to mitigate risk.
Yes, it's like any plant. You can plant outside, but it's, when you're planting thousands of plants at a time, they can regulate it a little bit better.
Yeah. And the workers, they work on what they're paid for what they produce.
Yeah, actually, it's based off of and we'll get into picking and harvesting. Actually, is the next one. So you kind of led me into that. So basically, it takes 3 to 4 years for a coffee plant to bear fruit. And the fruit is what they refer to as cherries. That'll be referred to a lot in this. And when it's time to pick, it starts green, and then it turns to a bright red color. And when it's bright red, that's how you know it's ready to be picked. And what they say is actually coffee grows, the cherries ripen faster in lower altitudes and higher temperatures. So like your coffees that are, high altitudes, which are actually a lot of them, the cherries ripen slower. And I'm thinking that has something to do with, the slower it ripens, the more flavor it is. So that's kind of why you're a lot of them, these farmers take their coffee seriously. So like, even though it does take quicker to ripen in lower altitudes, they plant them in higher, probably for better quality coffee.
I mean, we're familiar with the specs of our coffee beans in particular, and what altitudes they're grown at and everything. These are important things in the coffee world.
And actually, if you look on our website, which probably people don't even realize, if you look at the coffees that we have to the right of the coffee picture, we actually have labeled not just the region that the coffee's from, but you'll see the number, and that's actually altitude. That's the feet above water, above sea level that it's grown. So
Yeah.
fun fact for you. Next
It
time
is
you're on
fun.
our website.
I think it's cool. I mean, I live at essentially 0 feet above sea level where
Yeah.
you might be
You might even be almost underwater.
I might be
where you're
underwater any minute. Feels like it, I'll tell you. And it's raining today. And every time it rains, I'm like,
it's
I
probably
wonder if
puddling
this
up.
is the one. I wonder if my house is going to float away. Whatever. You might be like, what, 100 or 200?
Yeah, it's probably it's a couple hundred.
And I was just in Utah where I was over 10,000 feet on a mountain and it was blizzarding. And then within that same hour drive, dropped a few thousand feet, and it was sunshine and stuff like that. I mean, that's the beauty of So why it's important in altitude has so much to do with the weather that the certain altitudes produce, and including too the closeness to the sun and all sorts of things. So yeah, and just I would love it if everyone, maybe there are people who haven't seen it. I imagine there are people who haven't seen the bright red cherry that is encapsulating coffee beans.
Yeah.
It's a very confusing to me. You look at it, you don't think anything about coffee. First off, it's kind of like a fruit almost. It looks like
basically exactly what it is.
I'm looking, for those of the YouTube, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Basically, what's behind you. It looks like.
I didn't realize I had a fake coffee tree behind me this whole time. Yeah, that's kind of like the cherries, right?
Yeah.
So
you don't want to eat them. Actually, I'm pretty sure if you eat the cherry itself, it's poisonous. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but I've heard something it'll make it sick. So
I'll just take your word for it.
That's the reason why they do it in this process. And there's actually, so with harvesting, there's two different picking methods they do. And the first one is strip picking, and that's basically all of the cherries are taken off of the branch either by hand or machine. And the other one is selectively picked. So as it sounds, they pick it individually by hand. It's time consuming, but it's, you're picking the ripe ones. And they do that every 8 to 10 days, they say, during this harvesting season. And those are usually the Arabica beans, which is the higher quality. You have Robust and you have Arabica. Most of the coffees now are Arabica because
the secret's out.
It's just a better bean. So like I said, in most regions they have there's one major harvest a year, and it's within a couple months. And there's a couple countries like they say Kenya or Colombia that have 2 harvests a year. It's once again it comes down to climate, and it's how often the coffee plant actually blooms and flowers. So just in those countries, the plant flowers multiple times, so they pick it multiple times. And then from there, you go on to processing the cherries, which this process is actually done as quickly as possible, and that's basically just to avoid spoilage, because the fruits, once you pick them off of a plant, the time is on crunch time to get
of the essence,
right? And depending on the location and the resources these farms have, there's 2 methods to this too of processing, and that the first one is what they call the dry method, also known as unwashed or natural processing. And this is your traditional, this has been around for as long as coffee has been around. And it's basically, they're in locations where water is not as prevalent. And usually smaller farms will do this just because it's a cheap way of doing it. And some people, if you're into coffee, might have seen pictures or videos of this. They spread the cherries out on these elevated tables that have good aeration, so it's so it can dry more evenly. And they're baked in the sun for 15 to 20 days, is what they say. And throughout the day, farmers will come in with rakes and they'll rake the cherries to make sure that not only are they drying evenly, but it's also to prevent fermentation, because when fruit sits, it'll ferment.
Yeah.
At nighttime, they cover it to prevent any type of moisture at night from seeping in, absorbing
I was
into
just
the
thinking
sugar.
about that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then once the moisture level in the bean has hit, they say 11% or less, that's how you know it's done. And you can usually see it's the outer layer has kind of turned black and a little and dried up. And it just makes it at that point easier to remove the skin.
Hmm.
The next method is the wet method. And this one is like the new age one. And it's more expensive because you need machinery for it.
Yeah.
A lot of the big farmers have this. And it's basically it's just a quicker process. The cherries pass through a pulping machine, which kind of separates the skin and the pulp from the bean. Then they're separated by weight through a water channel. That's the wet method, where the lighter beans float to the top, the heavier ripe beans sink to the bottom. And then they're passed through a series of rotating drums, which separate them by size. And then they're transported to it's a heavy method here.
Yeah.
Then they're transported to like a water filled fermentation tank, where depending on the size, they'll sit in that for 12 to 24 hours, which removes the sticky outer substance on the beans, which they call mucilage. It sounds disgusting.
It is. Well,
Yeah.
it's not. It's just natural.
Yeah,
It's,
I mean, if you take
makes sense.
any seedling of a fruit per se,
Yeah.
the pit they usually have some type of substance on it. So
I'm gonna
that's
call it a
just
membrane. I think
membrane.
membrane's
That's a good
membrane.
yeah.
What was
So
it?
then
What is
once
it? Mucilage?
mucilage is what it's
I'm gonna
is
write
the
this
word.
down.
Yeah, that's actually the name they give it for coffee beans. Mucilage is mucilage.
That's how I
Um,
spelled it. Man, I'm good at things like
yeah.
this. That's a
Uh,
cool word. Kind of reminds me of the word fuselage. You
yes,
know,
very similar.
yeah, it is. The fuselage, of course, yes, of course, who doesn't know it, is the part of the plane that encapsulates all the passengers. Something like that.
Where I'm sure this word derived, has correlation to that.
It's got some similarity to it. It encapsulates the bean,
Yeah.
the whole kit and caboodle. That's cool.
So once that is removed, the mucilage, the beans are then rinsed a few more times just to kind of get rid of any of the lingering attachments before they're ready for drying in the sun for a couple of days, and that's just to kind of loosen up the shell of the bean.
Yeah.
Uh, So then from there, you have the milling process, which separates the outer, or it separates the different qualities of beans. This is actually when people ask, kind of like, how do you know you're getting good coffee compared
Yeah.
to lower quality coffee? It all comes down to the milling process. It actually it just sorts the different qualities of beans. When you grow any type of crop, you're going to have some bad ones, you're going to have some good ones. And in
Yep.
this process, this is how they pick it out. And there's a few stages in the milling process to kind of pick out these bad ones as opposed to the good ones. And it starts with hulling, and that basically it's just like it's almost like a vibrating table that removes any of the excess things stuck to the beans. They say the membrane, and then the next step is the polishing stage, which they say all the not everyone uses. It's kind of an extra step that they do to kind of it's just a little polish on the bean and it cleans it off. It's just to make it a step cleaner. They say it really doesn't do much from not polishing it. It's just an extra thing that they claim makes it cleaner.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I'm sure. During this whole process, of course, there's dirt.
right,
There's
right. Which, yeah, I mean, it's a crop, so you're gonna
Yeah.
get that. And then the next step, which is the most important step of the milling process, is the grading and the sorting, which we said it picks the good from the bad, and it's done by size and weight. And then the beans are also reviewed for color, flaws, or imperfections. As far as the size sorting goes, there's a couple ways they can do it. The most common way is they put it on screens and
Right.
a series of screens, and then it starts with the biggest hold screen, mesh screen,
Yep.
and it just gets smaller and smaller. That's how they find the different sizes. And then they can also use an air jet, and it's just different pressures. So like obviously they'll start with lower pressurized air, which will take the lighter beans out, the smaller beans, and then it just goes from there.
You know what this reminds me of? It's a similar process. I'm familiar, whether it's because I've watched like Dirty Jobs or things of that, like, you know what I mean? But it also reminds me of, I learned about the process of milling for different types of rocks and stones. You know, you and I laid down 3.5 tons of Pea Pebble in my backyard. You remember that?
Yeah, I sure do. In August, late August.
No, it was right before 4th of July, so it was hotter.
Or was it? I just remember it being almost 100 degrees.
It was, yeah, well, you know, there was water and beverages and whatnot.
Yeah.
What are you complaining about, dude? Man up, you know. we should be thankful to slave in the sun occasionally from time to time, which actually I who doesn't like being outside doing yard work, sweating, complaining, but you got your buddy. So that's what it was. We did that for a few days, built ourselves a nice little walkway and patio area with pea pebble. Anyways, all those pebbles, if you think about it, you're like, how the hell did they manufacture 3.5 tons of anything of the same rock? It's the same process. They clean and wash. They sort them out, different screenings and whatnot.
Yeah, it does it with a lot of these. This is very similar to most food products, how they pick and sort things. As far as imperfections go, now this one's a little bit more tedious, and that's usually by hand. So those guys or girls that look at every bean by hand, they sometimes have machines that can do this. Obviously, that's more expensive. For the most part, most of these do it by hand. Some places actually do it both by they first have humans look at it, and then they'll put it through a machine, so it's double, to ensure quality. And they usually, when they pick out these beans with imperfections or flaws, most places discard them. There are a few they say that will keep them and then sell them as low quality coffee.
Yeah,
they label it as low quality coffee.
Yeah, it goes to instant coffee and stuff.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So that's how they figure out that's how they determine, because like I said, I've been asked a few times of how do you know that you're getting good quality coffee as opposed to poor quality coffee? And it's a matter of those steps. And some places ensure quality better than others. Some have, more steps than others. So that's kind of how you determine it.
Yeah. I mean, we received, before we knew this, more involved steps of the process, which were always there. Naturally, we're always there long before we knew about them or cared to know about them. People in the business who received our shipments and from one place to the other and where it eventually would end up and get roasted, they would say, oh, these are clean bags. These are good bags of coffee. And of course, we didn't know there weren't clean bags. We happened to be pointed in the right direction through a long series of pointing us in right directions. Right. I mean, it wasn't just one thing and done. It was a matter of finding the right coffee from consistent good farms, and then the logistics of how they ship it and blah, blah, blah. And by the time they ended up in our hands, essentially, we were just like, yeah, looks great. Looks like nice green beans.
Right, exactly. And besides these facts, once it goes to the roasting, most roasters will look through the beans, give a brief look over of the beans before they put in the machines. And that's not just for quality control, but it's also to make sure that the machines aren't getting screwed up by. It's common to have, sometimes you'll find pebbles in there, pieces of wood,
little
stuff
pebbles
like that. Occasionally you'll get screws and nuts. It's just bound to happen. Things will fall in, and that's why you do the sorting, and that's why you look through it to make sure that none of that's in there.
Yeah, and like any produce from other countries, like tarantulas, which
bugs.
Does not happen. I don't know if it's happened.
I don't know. I haven't looked through the.
I haven't heard of it yet.
I'm sure it happens.
It's guaranteed to happen.
Animal byproduct.
Nature. Yeah,
it's bound to happen.
This is nature. So.
Yep. So then the next step from there is just exporting the beans, and it's so the beans in this, once it's done with the milling and the sorting, it then is now referred to as green coffee, which we've referred to it as plenty of times on this podcast. And it's just it's the unroasted bean, the green beans, and they're then put into they put it into the giant burlap sacks, which are actually, they say, jute or sisal bags, and that's just the threading. They're actually, I had to actually look up what jute and sisal were, and they're grains. So it's just the woven burlap sacks that you see on a bunch of things, and they're usually, how big are the bags? Like 160 pounds. We just put in an order actually last week. It's roughly 150, 160 pound sacks a piece.
They're weighed in like kilograms. That always throws me off.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just say, we say in the business, we go, I need a sack. And that, you know.
And it's roughly, I think it equates exactly like 156.7 pounds, I think is what that equates to. I think, and I only know that because we literally just ordered coffee. We had a huge order of green beans roasted, shipped, and they put them on these shipping containers and transport them to
pallets, baby.
Basically, they put them on pallets and they ship them over to the respective destination.
If I wasn't in the coffee business, I'd be in the pallet business. There's like 1 million pallets a day. It's crazy.
And I mean, just to give a little backstory on how we get our coffee, because this is another question that, I mean, I've been asked plenty of times, is where do we get our beans from? And we use a coffee trading company. We've actually mentioned them prior times on this podcast. Since day one, we were assigned to a sales rep from this trading company, and he's probably been the biggest help with us growing. He picked the bean. He would give us. We would kind of ask him, like, I mean, you talk to him, you would say, like, what do you recommend, basically?
Yeah. It's like, all right, so his name's Robinson. Now Robinson's from Mexico, X amount of years ago. I don't know. But when he got into the coffee game here in America, I mean, he was just a knowledgeable source of all things coffee. And I needed to know what his thoughts were, because there's no way Pat and I have tried all the beans in the world. You know, it's just not, but we had criteria to start with. And so we knew what we were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, they have so how it works with this trading company, they're a huge company. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of clients around the country, different coffee shops, roasters. They update their list of their offerings once a month, if not every couple of weeks. It's very frequent. And for those who don't know, the prices of coffee change. It's like gas. It changes almost daily. To where, and it's not by a lot. It can be, I guess, depending on.
I'd say ours recently was upped.
There were a few that actually did change dramatically, I guess. Right?
Yeah, our last order. I mean, listen, are we giving away too much? I don't think so. Whatever. Let's say some of our beans went up over 40 cents a pound, though.
Right, and, which adds up when you're buying, thousands of pounds of coffee. Does.
Especially when Pat and I make the decisions on what things cost. We're like, if you just not trying to charge $30 a pound or anything like that. Hopefully never will.
Yeah. I mean, even though our prices don't change currently, they are for us whenever we order coffee, it just fluctuates. And that's just, it's due to supply and demand, and also, climate, sometimes one year they'll have a good crop and then the next year, they'll be ravished by a natural disaster or something, But it fluctuates with gas prices. They have to ship the beans. So there's a lot involved with exporting coffee.
Yeah. And Pat and I we like to say, well, all right, great, but just get it done. Right. That's the thing, is there's companies that do everything along the way. The shipping is not the company that we buy from, and the company we buy from is not the farms, the farm.
Right.
And the farms probably have maybe a middleman between them and the company, actually. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. So everybody's in on this process to get the coffee to where it needs to go. And then And then it comes to Pennsylvania, like for us.
That's really how it is. Before we get into our personal stuff, I'm just going to finish up this list.
Sure, man.
It's not much. And there's actually no explanation of the next couple ones because we all know it. The next thing from Exporting Beans is coffee tasting, which we actually will get into a little story with that. And that's just you try out the beans. And we actually talked about it, cupping, the cupping process, which is the slurping, like mixing grinds. And then the next step is roasting the coffee, then it's grinding, and then it's brewing, the last step. But that is the
like
step that that's how long it takes from growth to grind. Man. But going back to the coffee tasting, I figured this would be a nice time to kind of explain to people how we how we choose it. It ties back into Robinson in our trading company.
I have pictures of this day, actually. Maybe I should post some pictures.
You should. I think you should repost it. I know it's on our Instagram from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, years ago. Pat and I.
Go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
you're the one who deals with them a lot.
You and I were like, all right, what coffee do we sell? We have options here. There we had our criteria, as I mentioned, organic, and also a few extras where we could, which I believe all of them are fair trade, and some were Rainforest Alliance and all that. And so it came down to, okay, what coffees do we like that we actually stand behind and want to sell? These are
actually, I'm going to interrupt you very quickly, because you just actually talked about this fair trade, because you actually mentioned this earlier on in the podcast, and I didn't actually go over it. You mentioned that the farmers get paid per how much they
produce,
they bring in, and that's. So it's true. So what I didn't cover, I meant to actually, was that these people who handpick the beans, the ones that aren't using the machines, at the end of the day, they weigh how much each farmer has picked for the day, and they get paid depending on how much they've picked. With fair trade, that's actually not true. With fair trade, and this is why you want to support a fair trade company or product, those farmers get equal pay, no matter how much. I mean, obviously they're not slacking, but it's not based off of their production on the day. They get a flat rate or whatever, and it's just all around better.
It's like the Italian / a lot of European model of dining, where you don't tip, or you tip very little, because they're getting paid. That's their livelihood. And I know a bunch of stories. I've only been to Italy very limited time, but I know stories of people who have gone and insulted the staff with their tipping, and they go back the next day, and the day they didn't know, they were dancing with the staff, and then the next day they go back because they tipped them so well, and they thought they were going to get such high treatment the next day, and they were basically, given the shun, if you will. And it's pretty interesting, because it is a different model and a different way of doing it. I do thank you for saying that. That's a great way. That is one of, it is probably more than one of the ways fair trade makes things really, really.
Yeah, there's plenty of benefits to it. That's just one of the big ones.
Yeah, we can dive more into that another time. Let's wrap up the podcast with saying this story about how we got our coffees. But we had known we would do Peru as a single bean. We wanted to. And for those of you who drink the Alpaca, you know what we mean. That's just, it doesn't need anything else to it. That's like the all-encompassing bean in my head. It's like, even if you like cream in your coffee, people drink that and they go, maybe I don't need the cream in this one. That's very interesting. So I like that. But we wanted to have our own little I almost want to say trademark, except I have a high aversion to that word right now. But we wanted to have our own, something of our own special making and concoction in the coffee world.
Which is pretty customary whenever you go to a coffee shop or roast.
Yeah, people call them blends. It's what they are. It could be any amount of beans. But the very interesting thing about the beans is you could take two amazing coffee beans that taste amazing on their own, and you mix them together, and you end up with a worse coffee taste. It just is what it is. So it's a very particular way, because what ends up happening is there's only so many notes really that you want to taste at any given time on your palate. Your palate is not going to like everything at once. And so you want to do that very right. Well, Pat and I, it's not that we didn't trust ourselves to pick this out. We were like, well, what do we know? You know, what if the two of us just happen to like a coffee, but no one else in the world does? Who knows? So we invited, I think, 12 people over.
Right. And we made basically before that, we were given samples from our guy Robinson. He's mailed us a bunch of samples of, I don't even know how many it was. It was a dozen, maybe, different countries.
Yeah.
And he had Colombia, Brazil, the big ones. He had a few in there.
India.
India. I remember that one. And obviously we tried all of those first because we knew we wanted a couple just single origin, which we obviously have. And then we decided, hey, why don't we try a blend out? And that's where this came in.
So, and by the way, one of these was also Mexico, which we ended up doing on our own. It became its own bean, which is interesting. But yeah, so we made a blind survey. We had 12 different survey forms for all the people, and each coffee. I mean, I think we only made it to like 11 or 12 before people started tapping out, because we were just like pumping coffee and 2 ounces each of this coffee.
If you go on our Instagram page, there's the I don't even know what they call those, the set stories that are on your page. Some of the, you can actually still see them posted, and they'll just show little clips of this this day. It was, I don't even know, 2 years ago, roughly.
Yeah, maybe more. It's called, it's under coffee tasting on our Instagram page.
Yep. Yeah, so check it out, because it'll show you what we're talking about.
Yeah, so no one knows what they're getting served essentially, but we're ranking. And anyways, the longest
we numbered them or something.
Yeah, up to maybe 1 through 10. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? We had a table for everyone to reference about typical coffee notes, and it's this giant wheel. You can find it. There's probably more than one. A wheel of coffee notes anywhere. It's
just different flavors, aromas, anything you pick out of.
Winey, bold, nutty, sweet, bitter, everything. So, and at the end of the day, I believe it was number 9, right? Something like that. I think
that sounds about right.
The coffee we went with for the original brew was number 9. So Pat and I counted all the totals, and Pat and I realized it was our favorite too. And it just so happened to be everyone else's favorite. So
it was majority. It was brew, it shocked me how much the group's opinion was basically
a consensus. It had a consensus out of over 10 coffees. Everyone said this is our favorite one, and the original brew became the people's coffee on that very day. And it's still like, I can't help when I think of what coffee tastes like. And I drink Papua New Guinea every day. This is like my favorite everyday coffee, drinking. And I love all our coffees, and it's a surprise when I drink them all. But I know which one's which at this point. And however, but when I think of coffee, I think of the original brew taste, because that's like so. It's almost the staple of, I think, what coffee should taste like as a standard. And it's a particular mix of a Nicaragua and Honduras beans that we have, roasted to a specific time and temperature, put together at a certain ratio. I'll tell you, the second in place that almost had included in it the Mexico beans. And so now, of course, we have Nicaragua on its own, and we have Honduras on its own as a dark roast, because we found that these two coffees, they're excellent. They do something on their own that is different than the original brew. But the original brew, just like, I don't know, it's perfect.
Sometimes two good coffees can taste good together.
Yes. So, and we mixed and matched a bunch, but that's
we just because we had the blind tasting for 10 or 12 of them, but we tried a lot more than that, and I'm still finding myself trying to mix things together to see how it tastes.
It's fun. It is fun. I still have some green beans here that we could barbecue up and test out. When I say barbecue, that's because Pat and I, like, when we receive some of these samples, a lot of them come in green. And we don't have an at-home roaster, if you will. There are such things. We've just never. Who cares? We're not going to do it. We're not going to do these 1 pound roasts.
We have a roaster. We have someone who can roast with us.
Yeah. But we have barbecue and it works just as good.
Yeah, I mean, if you YouTube it, you can technically roast green coffee on your grill.
Yeah, what you run into is the issue of consistency.
It's not an even roast, but
yeah. But Pat and I have tested many a bean that way, and whatever, man. From our humble beginnings, look at us. We're the biggest coffee company on the East Coast, I'm sure, at this point. So, well, with all of our help, damn it, we can be, and maybe we should be, because we are doing it right. We are doing it right. What can we say? We're the good guys now. Things coming up. Anything?
The name will be coming out. Yeah, I mean that's. I have new labels coming in soon. Yeah. Things with just the new logo.
Pat and I are so aware. We've been talking about the subscribing for a while.
That will come after we release the name. Obviously things were just delayed. So it'll be in the next 2 weeks is when everything will be rolled out.
Yeah. Furthermore, we've got some more One Piece each organization sponsors, sponsored events coming up. I'll tell you more about that as they are on the books. And
the sponsorship with Team Shadow. I mean, from what I remember, their season should be starting in the next couple months, right?
Yeah, Mitch is down in Florida. I mean, at least he was over the weekend, and he was doing some race. I got to catch up with him.
So, I mean, our plan is to be out there, if allowed, with the team. So
that's right. And if I'm not allowed,
we'll have coffee.
Yeah, I'm showing up anyways. Unofficial. All right. Everyone, thanks so much for your support. It makes talking about the coffee a lot of fun, because we know what we're talking about when you taste this coffee, and we're kind of celebrating not just Pat and myself, our work here. It's really like we talked about this whole podcast. It's this giant conglomeration of people, and I feel like when we talk about the good guys, I don't just stop at me and Pat. I really think about all of the people that are our support base, our customer base, we can call it, but it's really just like our friends and people who believe in the way of doing things the way we do it. And I believe all the good guys too, to be pretty much everyone part of this process, down to the farmers. I mean,
anyone we work with as well.
Pat and I we're lucky. We get to choose who we work with. We choose a lot of good people who help us. And here we are. Wouldn't be here were it not for them and for each other. You demand, Pat.
I got you.
All right, brother. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for signing off.
Joining us.
Happy St. Pat's. If it's already past you, I'll celebrate anyway. Take a shot. All right. See you. Good night. Good night.